Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Parallax Abstraction, and welcome to another episode of Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. Today, we are going to be taking a look at another TurboGrafx-16 game, and it's not going to be a great one, I hate to say. Yeah, you know, I keep having to remind myself that the point of this series is to showcase all kinds of different games throughout the ages, and not all of them can be good or ones that I really like. So, today we are going to be taking a look at Vigilante for the TurboGrafx-16. So, this is kind of interesting. This is a game developed by Irem Corp, and Irem Corp was interesting. They were around for quite a while, then they kind of went out of business, then they got reincarnated. Then, after the major unfortunate Japanese earthquake about a year ago, they quietly kind of shut down again. And though they were around for a long time, they weren't particularly known for a lot of things. They were very well known in North America for the R-Type shmup series, a very good series indeed. And they were also known for doing a few beat-em-up titles. They did the kind of decent Kung Fu game for the NES. It was an NES launch game, actually. They were one of the few third-party publishers that put out a game on the NES at launch. And they did Kung Fu, and then they did Vigilante, this was an arcade game originally, but they did various versions of it for other systems, including the TurboGrafx, and it was a beat-em-up, but it was kind of a bad one. I mean, I had this game when I bought my TurboGrafx, which I bought kind of late in its life, and I got this game with it, and I actually played a lot of it at the time, so you can see the riveting narrative here. The skinheads took your girlfriend Madonna hostage. And yeah, I played this quite a bit, and I really wanted to like it because it came with it, but in reality, it's just mechanically kind of bad, it controls bad, it's balanced badly, it's just not very good. So you see your basic concept here is it's just you need to fight through levels, get to the end, take out a boss, and progress. And you're doing it in the interest of getting Madonna back from the skinheads. But you can see how simplistic this is. See, I'm standing here, and there are literally endless enemies. And it's true, there are literally endless enemies. If you stand still, you can keep beating on enemies until the clock runs out. And I guess that's kind of one of the purposes of this game, because as you can see, this is a score attack game that does have a high score. Beat up some dudes outside of musical. I think that says musical. So you do get points for every guy you kill. And I suppose there, you know, if you're playing this game for the pee-pee room. I just noticed that. That's pretty amusing. Killing the skinheads that are coming out of the pee-pee room. So you can stand still and get yourself quite a number of enemy kills if you want. I had to take that guy out because he had a gun. But, oh. Yeah, teach you there. And yeah, your goal is to get to the end, and here we are at the end already. The first level's already over. And all you got here is your punch and your kick. And you can see you can't take a lot of damage. And you see you can jump, but all you can do is jump straight up. You can't attack while jumping. You can't do much of anything, really. And you see here, I can kind of cheese this boss. And this is kind of what you have to do, because these bosses take a lot of damage. And so these bosses can take a lot of damage, but they can also dish out a lot of damage, as you can see right here. So he hit me once and took basically a third of my health. And am I gonna die? No, not quite, but now I'm gonna die. So you see the patterns of this are ultra simplistic. There's really no strategy to this. And your goal is just simply to get to the end and listen to these awesome lo-fi digital voice samples in this game. So Irem was a big fan of their digital voice samples. Even Kung Fu on the NES had some of this stuff. And admittedly, that was kind of cool at the time, because you were kind of like, wow, you know, voice samples on systems of this caliber were very unusual, to say the least. And it was kind of neat to have that, I suppose, but... And this was actually a fairly decent port of the arcade game. So you see there, actually, I wasn't even doing any damage to him when I was doing that kick that makes him jump back like that. In theory, that's supposed to stun lock him so that you can get in and hurt him, but in reality, it doesn't do much. And you may also be noticing here that his energy is actually recharging to boot. So, you also only get 2 lives, I might add. So his energy is actually recharging, so even though you only do these tiny little bits of damage while you're kicking him, you gotta keep it up, because if you... It'll only take a little amount of time for his health to completely recharge. And as you can see, and you see, I can stun lock him here, but when I do that, or when he's down, you can only hit him if you get into a very, very specific spot in his hitbox. And while you're in that spot, he can very easily pick you up. There's no block. There's no real way to dodge, effectively, because you can only jump straight up. You can't jump back. And yeah, this is just not very good. Like, I honestly have a hard time determining of the sort of 2 bad games I've done thus far on this channel, this and Altered Beast for the Genesis. I honestly have a hard time debating which is worse. Like, look at this right here. Like, you come back... from the, as is the case in most games, when you come back from getting killed, I'm getting some hits in on him here at least, when you come back from getting killed, you're temporarily invulnerable. It's supposed to give you an opportunity to sort of get back on your feet, get your bearings, and get back into the fight, right? Except you actually can't hit the enemy when you're invulnerable. So it renders that whole mechanic completely pointless. Alright, I managed to cheese him out there at least. And the stage is clear, and now we get this god-awful clear music. Oh, Madonna's lost her shoes now. The junkyard, which is their turf, apparently. So you can hear that I'm kind of tripping all over myself trying to comment on this game, and that's the real problem, is there's really not much to say about this. Like, it is unbelievably simple. Like, it looks okay, I guess. For a launch TurboGrafx game, it actually looks half decent, I suppose. But, you know, it doesn't sound good. It plays terrible. Like, the controls are laggy. They're not tight at all. Like, you've got 2 moves and a jump that is largely useless. You're just fighting... Like, this feels like Call of Duty 4 with the, you know, what they called the spawn closets, which was the idea of just certain places where enemies would come at you endlessly. And yeah, I guess if you're playing this for score attack, which, I mean, beating the default high score on this is clearly very difficult, because even after that massive bonus I got at the end of the first stage there, I'm not even anywhere really close to the 5 grand factory high score, which, by the way, does not save in this game, as is the case with most TurboGrafx games. The high score does not save. So you can see here the stages are ultra short, and the bosses just all have really simple, not particularly inventive patterns to them. Like, you can almost kind of tell that there was a shmup mentality, that when that this was a game that was made by shmup designers, because it's all pattern based for the most part. The boss's moves are not, oh, this guy can actually hit when I've come back from the dead, so that's good at least, I guess. You can almost tell that there's shmup mentality to this, because while the bosses do have some degree of randomization to their moves, generally you can sort of guess their patterns and cheese them out based on that. And that was generally the way shmups worked, but shmups were designed that way because you were supposed to sort of min-max the game. Like, see here, I've got these guys on either side of me, and you can't really, because you can't block and you can't jump or roll dodge or anything, you can't really attack one without getting hit by the other. Like, it's kind of unavoidable. And yeah, I ran out of continues. Second stage. I don't even think I got to the 3rd stage when I owned this game. I mean, maybe I did, but I don't know. It's just... it's just kind of lame. And you know, it's funny because I actually kind of liked Kung Fu for the NES, which is really what this game is. I mean, it's a better looking version of that with a different story, if you want to call it that. Irem literally just took Kung Fu and went, alright, let's make another game about that, which is about some guy rescuing his girlfriend from what is apparently an entire race of skinheads, because there are millions of them. And, like, I love brawlers, right? But there were so many brawlers out at the time that were so much better than this, that this almost feels kind of exploitative in a weird way. Like, you know, it was an arcade game, and it was by an established developer at the time, and brawlers were popular when this came out. Like, 1989, this is the era of Final Fight. And it feels like just kind of a cheap attempt to capitalize on that. Which is too bad, because, yeah, I generally liked Irem for as sort of, you know, minimal as their output was in North America. I mean, to be fair, I say that Irem wasn't known for very much, but that was mostly in North America, because they were actually a fairly prominent developer in Japan that did a lot of games for the Japanese scene, which was very, very big in the 80s and 90s, that never made it over here. I mean, R-Type was by far their biggest thing. And I mean, even R-Type, I like the R-Type series a lot, but even as shmups went, and iconic shmups at that, it had its own problems, you know. But this just feels like it feels like a game, like it's one of those things that you hear people snarkily go, oh, what, is this the game that they made, you know, they gave to the interns to make when they weren't out getting sandwiches for everybody? And it kind of feels like that in a weird way. There's just really nothing redeeming about it. And I mean, yeah, I guess it was a fairly good port of the arcade game, which was probably how they attempted to sell this on the TurboGrafx at the time, because the TurboGrafx needed unique games to sell it, and a lot of its launch titles that were made for it were kind of not all that good. And I think this was an attempt. Irem was one of the few third parties who actually worked with NEC to put stuff out on the TurboGrafx, and I think this was NEC going, look, we've got all these amazing arcade games that play arcade perfect on our system. And Irem did make an R-Type for the TurboGrafx. I actually do have it. This is the Wii Virtual Console edition of Vigilante, and I actually do have R-Type for this as well, which is a fairly solid arcade release, or arcade quality edition. But the problem is, when you make something arcade perfect, but it was crappy even in the arcades, then you still don't get anything of real note. Oh yes, and here's the other thing. Now you see, I was taking damage there even though I was supposedly invulnerable. The enemies will actually keep coming if you don't get yourself to the end of the level. So, yeah, I don't know. You know, this was obviously something that was important to the TurboGrafx lineup, and it's a game that a lot of people do remember. I think a lot of people do remember it with rose-tinted glasses, to put it mildly. But it's nonetheless important to talk about for that reason. But like I said, you know, I can't always talk about only good games. Sometimes there are games that it is important to talk about why they were bad and what was better, and this is definitely one of those games. If you want a brawler, there are a million other ones from this era that, you know, many of which I will eventually cover, that are substantially better. I have plans to cover a couple of them in the not-too-distant future, actually. Or if you want a much more simplistic, side-scrolling brawler with easy-to-understand controls, go play Kung Fu or Kung Fu Master. Those are the same formula, but they feel better and are just generally more fun than this one, I gotta tell you. So, and if you want to play this right now, I am actually playing the Wii Virtual Console edition, but because of the... I'm presuming because of the turmoil at Irem and the fact that Irem basically left the video game business a while ago, all the releases that they had on the Virtual Console were delisted, actually, about a year ago. So if you already bought this a long time ago, like I did, I bought this a few years ago because I was like, oh, Vigilante, I remember that in the TurboGrafx. I think I had fun with that. No, I was wrong. So if you bought any Irem releases already, then you can still get them. But if you want to go get this now, it no longer exists on the Wii Virtual Console for purchase. So you're basically going to have to buy this on the card and buy it for the system if you want. You shouldn't, but, you know, that's your option if you want. This did come out on a number of other platforms, home computers, for the most part. The arcade original are definitely the best versions, I guess. I mean, best is a relative term. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't recommend it. I mean, you've seen it here, and this is probably all you really need to see of it, if you ask me. But, yeah, that is Vigilante, published and developed by Irem Corporation in 1989. We are looking at the TurboGrafx-16 version through the Wii Virtual Console. Yeah, there's better things you could play, and I think you probably should. My name has been Parallax Abstraction. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.